This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and Upsnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolutions Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, SHERI HORN HASAN of Karmic Evolution Astrology, coming to you on June 30th, 2022 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. Before I get into this week's Astro news, you can use my usual housekeeping stuff, which is to tell you that you can listen to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking podcast anytime by simply going to my website at karmicevolution.com and clicking on the upper right-hand portion of the banner labeled podcast. And from there, you can scroll down the page and hear the most recent show, either live or recorded. And or, of course, you can search the archive listings for past shows that you might have missed or to which you would like to listen again. And while you're there, when you scroll down below the most recently posted show, you'll see a downloadable freebie labeled How to Keep Your Sun Sign Happy, which is friendly advice for every sun sign from renowned astrologer Stephen Forrest, who many of you may have heard me say was my mentor for several years and from whom I have a master's certification in evolutionary astrology. But this freebie is about what each sun sign needs to be, well, happy. And it's based on an actual interview I did with Stephen a couple of years ago about identifying depression in the chart. And he's given me permission now to take what I had printed a while back as a sidebar to that article to distribute it as a short PDF giveaway. In the name of promoting astrology. So if you go and download that, it's on my homepage at karmicevolution.com. It's also on my karmicevolution.com astrologically speaking page, which is the page for the podcast. You will be signed up if you download the document, which is a short PDF. Something light reading for the beach for July 4th weekend. Take you no more than a couple minutes. And it will automatically sign you up for my Conversations About Consciousness astrology newsletter. But of course, you can unsubscribe anytime. So be sure to grab it when you go to listen to the podcast or just go visit my website, whether you're listening live or after the fact. Oh, and please enjoy. Separately, you can always follow me on my Facebook page, which is Karmic Evolution for Your Soul, and that's where you can read all my astrologically oriented posts. And finally, I'm offering still my 1-hour discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading to listeners only for only $99. And that's for those of you who are interested in astrology. Maybe you're new to astrology, maybe you've been studying it for a little while. It's still, I think, pretty, I was going to say obvious, but that's not the right word. a lot of times people are studying astrology. It's a passion, but it's a hobby, right? So we only have a certain amount of time. We have busy lives, etc. And we start to get interested in it. We develop a passion for it. And we're learning, but we really don't know how to interpret a chart, most of all our own charts, right? And all of us, no matter how hard we try not to be, are subjective. So this would be an objective look or a brief look at your chart. If you're interested in having delineated the true meaning of it, which really means essentially revealing what is your life's purpose here on this earth in this incarnation, what is your highest destiny to this in this lifetime, how can you achieve that destiny, and what is it you need to let go of, meaning patterns of behavior that might have originated either early in this lifetime and or during past lives that now affect your current relationships, your decisions about career and jobs, your finances, your locality, and or your health, but that these things they no longer serve your soul's karmic journey forward. In other words, acting on habit, right? So insights into what tripped you up in the past and how to gain and entertain new perspectives to get greater awareness through astrological insight that will ultimately bring you transformations that will bring greater happiness and satisfaction into your life. So, as I like to say, all this is easy when you take advantage of my 1-hour discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. You'll find easy access to this offer now on my website at karmicevolution.com/karmic99. And as I also like to say, at almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. All right, so let's get into this week's Astro news you can use. I'm going to rehash some of what happened 2 days ago on June 28th because I feel that, the Cancer new moon was definitely a seed planting time, and the fact that it correlated with Neptune's station retrograde is something that really emphasizes the message about getting in greater touch with our intuitive processes, and in doing so with our own physical body. So first I want to say happy summer solstice to everyone. We're in Cancer now. We're past the June 21st summer solstice when the sun entered sensitive, nurturing, family-oriented, compassionate Cancer. And as I said, we experienced the Cancer new moon on June 28th at 7 degrees and 22 minutes of this archetypal sign of the mother, which invites us and is inviting us still to plant seeds that will blossom into a greater ability to connect, as I said, with the more intuitive portion of our psyches, rather than relying solely on our logical, empirical, egoic natures. Now, traditional astrology considers the moon dignified in Cancer, and that means that it's allowed its highest expression through this zodiacal sign in ways that connect our visceral emotions to our physical bodies. Now, because of the monthly fluctuations of the moon in general and the moon's rulership of Cancer, we come to understand the organic female nature as it relates to the cycles of conception, pregnancy, birth, puberty, maturation, and eventually death and dying. These are the cycles of life, and they're governed, as I say, by the moon. Many of you may know about the progressed moon, which is a whole different topic, but it's a 27.5-year cycle that elongates but mimics the 27.5-day cycle for each lunar month. And so, we can look at the cycles of life through the slower moving progressed moon cycles. However, exquisitely sensitive and massively intuitive Cancer's highly developed, fine-tuned emotional sense feels through its gut, which is why Cancer's also often linked to the literal physical stomach. That's because Cancer's energy, like I said, is visceral. And it's that feeling based on instinct, which simply knows even if it doesn't know how or why, it knows what it does. I'll just mention also, when we link Cancer to the stomach, many of you who carry Cancer energy or know Cancers, Cancer's the type, you come to your friend's house or your sister or your mom or whatever, and you're upset about something, and one of the things they do first is just give you a hug, Come in, come in, come in. I have a fresh pot of coffee I just brewed. Oh, and I just got this, apple pie. I just put it in the oven or the microwave to heat some up. Come, sit, let me feed you, okay? So there is a nurturing that's linked through the actual literal processing of food often, or the offer of comforting others through food, So back to the intuitive instincts. That kind of gut feeling, such knowing grants this Cancer archetype the instinct to nurture and mother others, as I just said, often because it senses when they are in pain or in need of emotional comfort. It's the intuitive instinct of a mother who knows when her baby's in pain or distress before this becomes empirically or logically or physically apparent. Or when one senses that she should turn left instead of right without having any logical, rational clue as to why, only to find out later that this path led to a gorgeous, never-before-seen view in your little local neighborhood or while you're on vacation, or perhaps if you've got a lot of Jupiter or Sag in your chart, lo and behold, there's a $20 bill lying on the ground, right? So it's that intuitive nudge, right? So, hang on. Sorry, just wetting my throat. As Jungian astrologer Liz Green explains in The Luminaries, The Psychology of the Sun and the Moon and the Horoscope, which was written with co-author astrologer Howard Sass-Bordas, and here I quote, "Mythically, matriarchal consciousness is concerned with natural cycles, giving priority to harmony rather than to human will or spirit, which can transcend it." Now, will or spirit is really more about Mars and the Sun, right? Because the Sun and Mars are ego-oriented. And she continues, "Thus, the moon in myth governs the organic realms of the body and the instincts. It's out of the female body we are all born and receive our first food. Likewise, it's not difficult to see what happens if we remain unrelated to the moon. We may lose our sense of connection with and care for the body, which on a more global level means disconnection with and care for nature and the living earth. It is the body which reminds us that we are mortal," Green explains. "And it's our emotional states," she adds, "that keep us in touch with our body as the two are intimately connected." And I quote here again, "Without sufficient expression of the moon, it is not only the body which suffers, it's our capacity to experience life in the present." So, this brings us to the current news of the week, which broke last Friday and which, clearly impacts females capable of giving birth, and also males who care about the females and, their capability to have autonomy over their bodies and to make their own choices. So what I get out of what Liz Green wrote long ago, just in general, about this archetype of the moon, which is exponentially, I don't want to say exaggerated, but we do have a lot of, Jupiter and Mars energy right now, which is that there's a portion of our society that is disconnected from their bodies, which disconnects them from their emotions, which disconnects them from their instincts, which disconnects them from their intuition. So remember, every new moon when the moon meets up with the sun for a new monthly lunar cycle, represents the marriage of matriarchal with patriarchal energies. And that means that this Cancer new moon, we are to marry our innate wisdom about our bodies, derived from instinctive, intuitive knowledge of the cycles of the feminine divine, with our rational, logical side. In short, it's this Cancer new moon that provides us the opportunity to plant seeds that allow us to get into greater intuitive touch with our bodies, to better sense our natural cycles, and understand that nourishing the body is an act of reverence for these cycles, and indeed for Mother Earth herself. And this, in turn, promotes our ability to change our quote-unquote normal habits, which the Cancer archetype represents, because it represents home, family, roots, tradition, the past, and habitual behavior, which is linked to the past, since much of how we live and what we do is formed by behavior patterns that were set both early in life and in past lives. The Cancer new moon provides us a sense of our childhood and our past life emotional experiences. And it's those experiences that govern our soul's past choices. And those choices are often made habitually, but unconsciously. And they determine how we deal with similar circumstances now, especially, of course, emotional ones, but not only. So these habitual responses may serve us at times, but often they do not. And again, that's because this is, right, the new moon, as I said, the marriage of the matriarchal to the patriarchal is the marriage of the instinct and the intuition with the logical, rational portion. So habit is not rational. So we do need the rational part. This isn't in any way, shape, or form saying that we need to forego the ego, forego the empirical world. It's simply to remind us that both of them integrate into the whole world. So again, these habitual responses, often unconscious, sometimes they serve us, but other times they don't. And that means that further introspection may be required now to determine how, by making more appropriately healthy choices, we may honor our true intuitive matriarchal consciousness rather than remain stuck in our empirical ego conscious awareness only. So in doing so, again, we balance the two into coexisting harmoniously as our inner mother and our inner father. So marrying logic to intuition as this Cancer new moon cycle waxes might cause us to ask ourselves some of these kinds of questions. How can I get in greater touch with my body's intuitive processes now? How can I make more time for myself so I'm not wiped out from caring only for others? And what are my true emotional needs? And how can I better nurture them? And I'd like to add also that, to me, as an astrologer, I've been studying and practicing for about 20 years now, a little over. And the Cancer archetype is one that's intuitive to the point of being psychic. And I understand that a lot of people don't really like that word, although there are plenty of others of us who, of course, embrace it. But there are several different zodiacal archetypes that lend themselves to psychic capabilities, and Cancer is one of them. So someday I'm going to do a webinar on this, so stay tuned. But for now, I'd liken Cancer energy along with others such as Pisces, the water signs, Pisces and Scorpio, but also Aquarius, which might surprise some, but I have an explanation for that, to the word clairsentience or clairsentient, which Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines as, quote, perception of what is not normally perceptible. And that sounds about right to me, even though we can take each of those signs that I mentioned and parse that down further, which is something, like I said, I would like to do someday in the future, but not today. So for now, let's stick with the kind of visceral gut knowing Cancer energy affords us. Again, if we're willing not only to acknowledge it, but actually listen to it as well. Now, as we know, Neptune stationed retrograde at 25 degrees and 25 minutes of Pisces just prior to the exact Cancer new moon on June 28th. And since Neptune is going to remain in retrograde motion until December 3rd, this planet of illusion, confusion, and delusion asks us to move inward for answers about what is real to us and what is not. Now, for some of us, that might not be a good time to take all psychic messages for granted, but nor is it wise to discard them completely either. And, the Cancer new moon, having arrived on the heels of Neptune station retrograde, called us to move inward also, and so that call becomes exponentially magnified. And Neptune's retrograde period, which, like I said, will last until December 3rd, draws us back to the Uroboric waters of the womb. It's there, remember, Neptune and Pisces rule the 12th house in the natural chart, and that's the house of gestation, right? Because it's when we are born, when we come over the ascendant at the moment and longitude and latitude of our birth. And then we're in Aries territory where we use our lungs to let everybody know that we're here, right? But back in the 12th house, in Neptune, during Neptune's retrograde especially, we go back to that environment, that womb-like environment, okay? And it's there that we lacked for nothing, that we wanted for nothing, as all of our needs were automatically met. I mean, if hungry, we ate. When thirsty, there was no shortage of drink. Sleep came silently and peacefully, and we, tucked away in our inner sanctum, floated safely and securely, impervious to the wars and other conflicts and worries and anxieties of the outside world. And now, it's from this metaphorical womb that we may gain greater access to both our instincts and our intuition, and to ascertain, again with the help of the Cancer new moon triggering this, through these needs, the true needs of our physical bodies. And as always, Neptune's energy remains vaguely nebulous, which causes us to rely on our intuitive processes more than or rather than our rational ones. So the Cancer new moon asks us to marry them, and Neptune's retrograde says, maybe there's more to this intuitive / psychic / perceptive / visceral gut feeling than I thought before. So Neptune's retrograde period can help us intuit, particularly through endeavors like meditation, prayer, creativity or creative endeavors or projects, or anything that puts us into a mindful state. This helps us intuit our soul's higher spiritual truths. So such states promote the ability to receive our soul's messages clearly and directly from the divine realm, unimpeded by any outer world distortions, illusions, or confusions. And since, as again, this is in alignment with this Cancer new moon's call to plant more intuitively balanced seeds, there's a double message here about revering and adhering to the wisdom of the cyclical nature of the divine feminine. So, in the short term, I recommended some of the questions we might ask ourselves at the Cancer new moon or as it waxes, because again, we've got another almost, it's 14 days usually. It's, 27 and a half day lunar cycle if you want to go to the minute. But half of that is roughly, it's, approximate 28 days, and half of that is 14, and we're 2 days into it. So that means we have 12 more days of a waxing cycle, right? So during Neptune's retrograde, as I said, we're pondering the questions that I mentioned before. And now during Neptune's retrograde period, which is much longer term, right? It's almost 6 months from the end of June to the beginning of December, 5 months or so. So we might ponder during this time, how much safer would I feel if I knew, I was truly, fully protected and supported? And how might I replicate this feeling of security to help me stay calm in times of emotional turmoil? And how can I self-soothe in a healthy, nurturing way, and thus avoid reverting to negative, habitual, escapist, or addictive coping mechanisms? And finally, and this relates to both right now, the moon's in Cancer and, the new moon in Cancer and the Neptune longer term, am I at the right stage of my life, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and financially or economically, to give birth to someone or something new? Now, if the answer is no, remember this is a seed planting time when we're talking about the Cancer new moon, and it's an intuitive time with the Neptune retrograde. So the seeds of our intuitive processes now and during Neptune's retrograde may bear fruit later when we're more intuitively ready. However, several sextile aspects that occurred at the Cancer new moon and are occurring now this week can aid us to utilize Neptune retrograde's energies positively in terms of achieving a goal now. In other words, if it's normally a time during Mercury retrograde when we lose touch with reality, we go back to that womb, we seek to escape, we don't want to deal with the hard questions or, ponder the different scenarios of what the hard answers might be, right? And remember, Neptune, especially in its own sign of Pisces, dissolves things. It makes them less clear or visible. It dissolves boundaries. But the purpose of this is to blur the lines between our ego's quote-unquote real empirical world, where we believe only in what we can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, and to get in greater touch with the unseen spiritual one, where our intuition alerts us to what's truly quote-unquote real and what's not. And since sextiles present opportunities, and there were several present at both the station retrograde of Neptune and the Cancer new moon, as well as this week, as I mentioned, they may well trigger into action the kinds of long-term solid planning that can allow us, during Neptune's retrograde until December 3rd in particular, not to get stuck in confusion or a fantasy land of unachievable dreams, but rather to ensure that those dreams are able to become concretely manifested in the physical, empirical world of the future. Now, I relate this, as I'm going to say, about the current events in our society right now, particularly, of course, here in the U.S., and particularly related to the issue of women's rights and the, what's the word? I had my headline was going to be, I might have said this last week, but I don't remember. Supreme Court murders women's rights, to make their own choices, or about to have autonomy over their own bodies. And we all know that there's huge talk now about that opening the door to many, many other things, including the banning of gay marriage. We know about the gun legislation that was overrode in New York, and you can now, and I think I mentioned this last week, get on a subway or a bus or whatever with a concealed weapon. So those of us from the New York area, but it was pretty much nationwide, remember Bernie Getz, So we go back to those times when, only it would be legal. It wasn't legal then, as far as I recall, for him to have a concealed weapon and then shoot someone because he thought they were threatening him. And so I'm not going to comment on I don't really remember all the details, so I'm not commenting on the rightness or the wrongness of that particular case, but it was a shocking case at the time. Let's just put it that way. And many of us around the nation, especially in its biggest cities, have no desire to have those kinds of shocks happen on a regular basis, so that we become completely numb to them, the way that half this population has become numb to the murder of children at the hands of deranged people with an AR-15 rifle. Okay, enough on that. So let's get back to these sextiles. So the sextile energy, and as I said, sextiles, they represent opportunities, right? And I just want to say that even though some of these that I'm talking about already occurred, meaning they're already perfected, let's remember that astrological energies can trigger things that happen in the future. So on a personal level, they may dissipate. The energy may dissipate. I'm going to talk in a few about Mars square Pluto, and that energy will begin to dissipate after a certain point. But in the collective, it can linger because it can trigger other energies that are yet to happen, okay? So my point in talking about these sextiles after the fact is that I believe what we've already seen, is the pending triggering of energies to come, okay? So, and some of which have already obviously been started. So let me be clear. These include that Mercury and Gemini's recent sextile to wounded healer Chiron in Aries on June 27th now allow us the opportunity to voice our pain related to past wounding. And when I talk about that here, I'm talking about the abortion issue. In addition, Mars and Aries sextile to Saturn and Aquarius that day also triggered the opportunity to temper any martial impatience, which Mars and Aries would normally have, and transform it into the planned, organized, logical mobilization of groups. Saturn, logical, planned, earthy, Aquarius groups, right? Through a well thought out, again, logical plan. Also, Venus and Gemini sextile to Jupiter and Aries on June 28th at the new moon helps us spread the word now through our relationships, our partnerships, in order to increase the number of those willing to engage in such future planning. Meanwhile, both luminaries at the Cancer new moon formed an easy watery trine to Vesta, the goddess asteroid known as the keeper of the flame and the one who tends the hearth fire, which allows the proverbial prodigal son to always find his way home. And as I've explained in previous podcasts, though if you're new, you wouldn't know and you might not remember, Vesta, known in Greek mythology as, quote, the woman beholden to no man, was the priestess of the ancient Greek temples to which warriors returning from battle came to cleanse themselves of the sins of war. And this was accomplished through the act of sexual intercourse, which they would have with one of these priestesses at these temples, and that allowed these men to return peacefully to their families and their communities. Now, such a practice illustrates reverence for the long-standing power of the divine feminine's matriarchal energies, and this sextile by both luminaries to Vesta in Pisces lends, I'm sorry, not sextile. Did I say sextile or trine? Hold on, I'm just looking back. Hold on, let me just check the chart. I want to make sure I'm accurate. Oh, of course, I don't have the chart up. All right, hold on. Sorry. I'm a little giddy today. I did not get enough sleep last night. But c'est la vie, right? Story of our lives. Hold on. Just want to be accurate. Yes, it's in Pisces. So from Cancer to Pisces is a trine. The sun and the moon at the Cancer new moon trined Vesta in Pisces. All right, let me go back to where I was before so I can get back on track. Hang on. Now I losted my place. Hold on. You think this all comes out of my head? No, I have to write stuff down before I go on the air. You know that. All right. So as I said, the trine at this new moon illustrates, and the meaning of Vesta, that kind of a practice, illustrates reverence for the long-standing power of the feminine divine's matriarchal energies and lends the recently passed Cancer new moon easy emotional access to birthing a new intuitive sense that the matriarchal lineage that's existed for millennia is indeed still alive and well, which I, for one, take as a good sign. In fact, given Neptune's retrograde, I think that the arrows are pointing to the fact that this reverence for the matriarchal cycles and the divine feminine may experience a rebirth now. Remember, we're going into the womb when Neptune's retrograde, and will metaphorically, theoretically, hypothetically be born sometime after December 3rd when Neptune stations direct. So for as long as there's a moon and a sun, there are lunar and solar cycles. And the moon's cycle ebbs and flows monthly with the tides, which the moon controls. And combined with, again, Neptune station retrograde, the Cancer new moon asked us to set our intentions for the positive future of matriarchal energy from now until the end of existence as we know it. In short, this is what's being incubated now during Neptune's retrograde period, the rebirth of matriarchal consciousness. At least, let's hope so. So as we contemplate all of this now, and during the waxing portion of this Cancer new moon's monthly cycle, we're cautioned by both luminaries, which squared Jupiter in Aries at the Cancer new moon on June 28th. But they caution, that energy cautions us against becoming overly optimistic or excessively righteous. And arrogance and the inability to hear another's point of view, we often find doesn't serve us well in the end. So this tight cardinal square that occurred tells us, at least in part, that the way to strengthen our faith in source energy might be by taking the opportunity to speak out, which was Mercury's sextile to Chiron the day before, and to use the political process to do so. Again, Mars sextile Saturn in Aquarius. In addition, we may dream now about a better future while Neptune's retrograde, but understand that we can make the concrete plans to allow it to become concretely, physically possible. And that we do through these sextiles' ability to give us the forethought to plan realistically. So we may accomplish all of this by expanding our ability to share stories now about why remaining stuck in a no longer realistic mindset, again, Neptune retrograde, dampens our ability to expend greater energy to achieve a cause in which we strongly believe. Jupiter in Aries, as I've said before, to me is the expansion of a cause, a fight for the cause. Jupiter is a righteous energy. It has religious connotations. It has connotations around travel and law and morality and higher education. So righteousness or arrogance is thinking we all know the truth, that the truth is absolute. And in Mars, it wants to fight to prove that it has the truth, but it goes to great lengths because of the explosive nature of fiery Sagittarius, which is represented by Jupiter or ruled by Jupiter, and Mars, particularly in its own sign of Aries, to say, let's get on our horses, let's go from continental Europe and travel all the way to Jerusalem and kill the infidel. So I think you've heard me say that before, and I think you probably get my point. So again, these other feminine energies are being given the opportunity to mobilize and plan and strategize for the future. And strategy is also a Jupiterian or Sagittarian trait. So now, I want to just remind everyone that it's important to remember that the universe does not take sides. The universe is benign. That's the way that I put it. And it's up to us mortals to decide how to act and or react to archetypal, universal, astrological energies. Some will feel the need to crusade, like I said, for further societal restrictions, because our way is the only right way, because we have the absolute truth with a capital T, while others will rage against such restrictions and battle for greater personal freedom. I'm allowed to believe something different from you. You don't have the monopoly on truth. So either way, that Mars-Saturn sextile in particular that's already occurred presents us with the dilemma of deciding which ideological side of the fence we're on, and allows us to take the opportunity to defend those positions now. Now, in terms of actuality within society, particularly within the United States right now, it's clear that immediately the ideological divide formed. So when I think of it in terms of politics, I think, okay, this Mars-Saturn sextile, as I relate it to politics, is really the opportunity for, like I said, those I said, decide which side of the ideological fence you're on, but those who are on the fence ideologically now get the opportunity to listen and hear from others about their point of view, and then they're going to make their decisions at the midterm elections, in November. So what looms like a shadow, albeit a short-term one, but I remind you what I said, that in our personal lives, an aspect forming in the sky, particularly if it's affecting a planet or angle or other sensitive point in our charts, can start to dissipate as soon as it perfects, which means, within a couple of hours, within 12 hours, or within 24 hours at the most, depending on how quickly those planets are moving to begin with. So, if it's the moon, it's very quick. It's hours, just a couple hours. If it's Pluto, it's going to take a year and a half to 2 years to transit whatever point. So, but we're talking about these more triggering events of the personal planets, which are the moon, the sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, right? These are known as the inner planets. So they can trigger things into action. And right now, which many of you are probably aware of, Mars in Aries is coming up to perfect a cardinal square to Pluto and Capricorn tomorrow on July 1st. Now, for those who are concerned, this energy perfects at 7:14 p.m. and 10:14 p.m. 7:14 p.m. Pacific time and 10:14 Eastern time on July 1st. Trying to get one's way or impose one's will on others now through coercive force borders on the incitement of violence. As this energy has been building, we've already seen sudden, explosive, potentially violent eruptions from within the collective, as well as emotional reactions reflecting Cancer's supersensitivity to being pushed beyond reasonable limits now. Just check your local, national, and international news for this on more. The first thing that I noticed, and it was way before this energy was supposed to perfect, if it's perfecting tomorrow on Friday, I believe it was Monday or maybe even Sunday, I don't recall offhand, that there was a story about the Russians bombing a shopping mall in the Ukraine in the middle of the country that had 1,000 people in it. I did not do my due diligence on all of the news, which is something I usually love to do this week, probably because Neptune was stationing and I was a little bit spacey, but I have Venus in Pisces, and Venus is the dispositor or ruler of my Taurus sun. So when Neptune makes moves, a lot of times, I'm a little dizzy here or there. Anyway. Like I kept saying that, I kept writing that this Mars-Pluto perfects July 4th, and then I had to go back and correct it, and I kept getting some dates wrong, so it was a little cognitive thing. But anyway, regardless, what I'm trying to say is that if you look, you can see Jupiter and Mars, right? The migrants that were found in the overheated, Mars's heat, excessive heat, as part of its interpretation, were found in a container truck where there was no ventilation and no air conditioning. And I do not know the latest number, but I thought it was up to maybe 50. I don't know, but maybe there were 50 people there, and a portion of them died of heat. I don't know what it's called. Heat stroke, I guess, right? And some of them were children. So what I'm saying is, on a practical level, try to avoid arguments that might lead to harm right now, and stay out of sketchy places or situations. This is one of the biggest times when you can utilize your intuition to say, no, I'm not going to that party, or something doesn't feel right. As this energy pretends the possibility for further explosive violence until it perfects tomorrow, and then may well trigger more of the same kind through backlash. Now, backlash we've already seen, at least in terms of people's bodies going out on the streets to protest Supreme Court rulings, recent rulings, obviously, particularly the striking down of Roe versus Wade, which is taking away an almost 50-year right that the Supreme Court granted to women under the Constitution, as most of you know. But likewise, avoid succumbing to emotional despair and heed the advice to go deep that I laid out above. Meditate, pray, engage in some artwork or some music or some dance, or take, a hike in nature. We have this holiday weekend coming here, so it's not a bad idea to chill and take it down a few notches, not place ourselves in situations where we know or think we might have an argument. And that's because impatient Mars in Aries urges Pluto in Capricorn to make the kinds of social and business reforms that might transform our lives now. Well, that's not because, I guess I segued that a little roughly, but it's in addition to, right? So Pluto's about reforms. And Mars in Aries is like, let's go, let's get those reforms done, right? So you could see that we would expect the kind of pushback that's already been evident, as I mentioned, throughout the collective, and especially in this country. So people taking to the streets, etc. So again, expect more pushback, whether it's that in that way or other ways, when this energy, or between now and when this energy perfects tomorrow night. Because when we try to get our way through coercive force, again, it promotes potential violence. So on a personal level, avoid arguments that lead to harm now, and stay out of harm's way. And again, this potential for backlash remains especially true while Saturn, which is currently still square to the transit in karmic nodal axis, and it was at this Cancer new moon, reminds us that if we're not happy with the authority figures currently in charge, then perhaps we should make a change, like in November. Meanwhile, watch for more. I want to remind you, too, that what was interesting to me was that the eclipses in the spring, the cycle of eclipses, according to Bernadette Brady, the father or old man is dying, ailing, and Saturn, Capricorn's the authority figure. So, we need a change in our rulers and our authority figures. Meanwhile, watch for more examples of how when a large portion of the collective feels emotionally pushed against a brick wall with nowhere else to turn, it may well lash out because such an emotional charge has been lit, which was sparked by the growing Mars, lit and further sparked by the growing Mars-Pluto square. Now, that will doubtless emerge out of the collective, or what will doubtless emerge out of the collective, as I've already said, is a solid, well-planned mobilization against any attempts to control our physical bodies now. Since doing so impedes the natural intuitive cycles of the feminine divine, we may take some comfort in remembering now that the old advertisement, which cautioned it's not nice to fool Mother Nature, might show her more angry or enraged side, right? Think of the bear with his cub. her cub, Mama Bear with her cub. And since Mars represents weaponry of all kinds and excessive heat, as I mentioned, anything that can cause bodily injury, such as cuts, bleeding, burns, bruises, fevers, or something worse, please remember to be careful right now, at least until this energy starts to dissipate. Now, the other thing is that with Mars involved in the Mars-Pluto square is that energies can be explosive, right? So Pluto aligns with an unstoppable energy that can push people and events to an extreme. And in such a frictionally energetic square, the results can be totally unexpected. And again, especially when it's related to using sharp objects or anything that's got heat, boiling water, guns, bombs, and equipment such as saws, knives, and blades. So again, please watch for examples of these in the collective between now and then, but please be careful around sharp objects, around heat, and that kind of equipment. You don't want to be opening the package with the scissors facing you and then find that you've just gashed your whatever, your midsection or your arm or whatever, however you're placing it. Now, later on July 4th or early on the 5th, depending on your time zone, Mars enters Taurus, while Mercury enters Cancer. And the warrior god, the warrior god here becomes a bit more methodical and less hair trigger in Taurus on one hand, while on the other, he may also become more stubborn about his goals. But Mars, which as I mentioned before is often equated to our egos, tends to push itself into situations through the ego's need to dominate. Now in Taurus, while he may calm down from martial Aries and become more harmoniously relationship-oriented rather than totally independent or independent-minded, can also focus more on getting a job done by marrying ego to intuition, or feminine to masculine, or anima to animus now. Ergo, based on what I said earlier about spreading the word through partnerships, and now I'll add again for a political cause via Venus and Gemini's sextile to Jupiter and Aries at the Cancer new moon, our efforts to plan, mobilize, and execute become more methodical when Mars becomes more patient in Taurus between July 4th and until he enters Gemini on August 20th. And I'm guessing that by around then, or the beginning of September, especially as the Saturn-Uranus square begins to tighten once again, we'll start to see mobilization around things like political advertising campaigns directed at electing pro-choice politicians on the midterm ballot. We're in the primaries still now, so we'll see what happens from that. But meanwhile, Mercury in Cancer until July 19th will incorporate family into its topics of conversation now. Since this is traditionally the period for graduations, weddings, anniversaries, and the like, this isn't unusual. However, combined with the energies mentioned above, I believe everyone will be discussing whether or not a woman has the right to bodily autonomy and deciding whether or not to start a family, meaning give birth to a child. Now, Mercury, newly in Cancer, also sextiles Mars in Taurus July 5th, providing the opportunity for discussions around family planning now, as Venus in Gemini sextile to wounded healer Chiron, Venus in Gemini will sextile wounded healer Chiron on July 6th, allowing us to partner with others to converse about and broadcast stories of past wounds related to family and children and babies, along with potential future ones. And again, always under the guise of Cancer, knowing that this, when we speak of such things, we're talking about the female body and the natural cycles of life. So, I think it's also interesting to note that we might look at the Jupiter archetype from the Sun's square and this Cancer new moon square to Jupiter, and the themes that I talked about before, right? Movement, travel, issues around immigration, morality, which is really what the Supreme Court is being accused of having exercised rather than sound legal judgment and respect for traditional precedent, and that these energies now give us the kind of orientation to ask ourselves now, what kind of moral world will be created by moving backward toward a less inclusive, more restrictive society versus adopting laws and regulations, whether based on religious beliefs or not, that keep us stuck like glue to a no longer viably relevant past. We might wonder how remaining stuck in such an old value system, particularly again as Saturn squaring the nodes, how an old value system keeps us stuck in those habits that I talked about, those unconscious habits, and how can that solve our present day and future problems. So failure to even contemplate how restrictive consequences may backfire in terms of a desired goal to restrict, remain also at the crux of Uranus transit through Taurus now. And again, as mentioned, especially as Saturn in Aquarius begins to retighten its square to Uranus and Taurus this fall. So next week, I think, but don't hold me to it yet, I'm going to take a look at the next 6 months, and we'll go through some of the energies of, I've mentioned before the upcoming eclipses, Mars retrograde, which won't happen really until October in Gemini, but also this Saturn-Uranus, which this summer I think is going to be a repeat a little bit of what happened, not a little bit, I think a lot, because now we have a cause and two big causes, which are the abortion issue and gun rights, okay, versus the rights of everyone else. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution through this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week on July 7th for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with the karmic healing and joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book.